something I value about YouTube as a forum for people putting forward their own ideas is not just that often I get to learn something new or I get to hear another person's point of view, but also it means that sometimes I get to question my own point of view. The latest meme to sweep through the atheist mindset here on YouTube is the backlash against Muslims following the recent thinly veiled death threats that have been issued to the producers of South Park following their depiction of the Prophet Muhammad. The response here has been to push back and do more of exactly what the Muslim protesters were complaining about, produce images of the Prophet Muhammad. But we're not just seeing images of the Prophet Muhammad, we're seeing some pretty unflattering depictions of him. My first reaction to this was, ha, suck on that one. And I was tempted to join in. I have a simple model of a pig that I put together some time ago from some 3D primitives, and I was going to introduce him as Mo the Pig, prophet of the Islamic religion. And as I was putting this together, and feeling very pleased with myself, another completely different stream of thought started to form in my mind. I started feeling uneasy about the whole process. And at first, I wondered whether this was because I was worried about the repercussions. We've all heard Christians complaining that some of the things that are said about Jesus wouldn't be said about Muhammad. The inference being that we wouldn't dare because we know exactly what those crazy, barbaric Muslim people do to people who insult their wacky religion. But as I thought more about it, I considered how I'd feel if I had something along the same lines that depicted Christianity. Say, a drawing of the Virgin Mary giving Jesus a blowjob. And I actually felt the same way about that. In The God Delusion, Richard Dawkins is very disparaging of this idea of respect for belief, whether it's respect for somebody else's beliefs, in spite of those beliefs being perceived as ridiculous, or respect for the fact that somebody believes this stuff. Now, I'm with Dawkins on this. I don't believe that I have to respect somebody else's bizarre belief system, and I don't feel that I have to respect their belief in it. The only respect that I feel is their right to believe it if they choose. Believe the world's flat and the moon's made of green cheese if you want, just don't expect me to respect those ideas, or respect you for holding them. So, going back to, Piggy Mo and Sucky Sucky Mary, it occurred to me that my unease arises from another aspect of respect, and that's actually respect for other people's feelings. Now, personally, I have no problem with Muhammad being depicted in cartoons, or Jesus being depicted in Jerry Springer the Opera. I'm a firm believer in freedom of expression. I believe very strongly in freedom of speech, and I don't believe that people have any kind of right not to be offended. If people are allowed to speak freely, then somebody somewhere is not going to like what they have to say. But just because people don't have a right not to be offended, does that necessarily mean that it's okay for us to offend them? And is that the kind of society that we really want to live in? One where we have no basic consideration for other people's feelings, or even when we go out of our way to be purposefully offensive. The people who made their death threats to the producers of South Park, and they are death threats, it might not be enough to convict them in a court of law, but the implication is very clear to anybody who reads it. The people who made these death threats are quite clearly the kind of fucking nutters who don't deserve any kind of respect. But what about the other 99% plus of Muslims in the world who are just as horrified by these death threats as non-Muslims? By breaking the taboo of depicting Muhammad in a cartoon, and by doing so in such an aggressive and offensive way, in a way that's almost designed for maximum offence, is that really the best way? Doesn't it hamper their ability to speak out against the extremists because they also feel threatened by that kind of attack? So, in short, is it really helping? Now, I know that I could be accused of being a bit hypocritical here, given my recent favouriting of the Tim Minchin Pope song, but I really do feel these two things are completely separate. Surprise, surprise. One of them is a protest against injustice that targets a group of people who are directly responsible either for making an injustice take place or by enabling it and allowing the perpetrators to get away with it. It's calling them out directly. The other, to me, seems to be an all-out attack on a wider group of people in order to hit back a group of extremists, but with total disregard for the collateral damage. Freedom of expression and, protesting for and against issues is essential for a healthy society. And another key ingredient is tolerance. Tolerance isn't about agreeing with other people, it's about allowing them the freedom to hold their own views and live their lives in a way that makes them feel fulfilled. And for tolerance to work, it also requires a bit of self-control and some thought about how your actions are going to affect others. Not necessarily self-imposed or socially imposed censorship, but just a consideration of the consequences of expressing any views, the impact that that expression might have on other people's emotions. As I've said, I believe that freedom of speech is a fundamental right. It has to be a fundamental right in civilized society. But just because you are free to say something doesn't necessarily mean that you always should. And if you do feel compelled to speak out against a group of people, then I think it sometimes pays to consider who that group is, rather than launch an indiscriminate attack that will offend people who are completely innocent of your wrath, and who may actually be on your side.